I'm Rana, and as you all know, before the elections, the shows are usually related to the elections, and we have a lot of candidates on. And then after the elections, we totally shift gears because we want to let people know what other great things are going on in New London and in our area, especially as we're coming up on the holiday season and so many people are thinking about like buying stuff, and we want people to also think about doing stuff and other things to support this season. So with that in mind, my guests today are from an organization that's actually been on the show quite a few times, Fresh New London, but some different faces from some of the guests I've had in the past because you keep growing and changing and evolving. So tonight, my guests are Alicia Makeeda, who's the executive director of Fresh New London, Tony Szymanski, thank you,
yep,
who is a fresh member who's been very involved in a new project, relatively new project at McDonald Park, and Makeeda Bandele Asante.
Yeah, Bandele Asante.
Okay, who is also a fresh member who is one of the Fresh youth who is really active in the youth program. So welcome all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess to start off, I wanted to ask you, and it can be really in any order you want, how each of you came to be involved with Fresh, because looking at the three of you and seeing how the three of you are involved, it seems like you probably had very different roots into the organization.
Okay, I'll start it off. I live in the area over on Blackhall Street, and some people were knocking on doors one day and brought up the subject of McDonald Park, about a piece of land that the city owns, used to be a park, and they wanted to get involved in it with Fresh and like planter boxes and a bunch of different things. I'm like, okay, sign up, it's volunteer stuff. Didn't realize how close I was to the park. I can walk out the back of my property and look through the houses and see the park right from where I live.
Well, it wasn't really used much as a park before that,
No,
right?
no, it was just empty. It was vacant for like years. And we had gotten involved, and we actually set up 2 design teams, 4 on each, and put a lot of information out to the community as to what they would actually like to see there. Not just vegetables, not just youth area, just a bunch of different things. And off of that list is how we started the teams. And it was kind of funny. We had these big poster boards, little stick-on things, crayons, magic markers, and that's how we got started.
That actually sounds like fun.
Yeah, it was. It was really, really nice. And then we, out of those 2 designs, came up with one. And we all worked on it together, and as of now, if you go by McDonald Park, it's not an empty park anymore. A lot of people stepped up to the plate, youth, a lot of community members, and it's on its way to being something that we had visioned, and everything is falling into place. So.
Now, where exactly is McDonald Park? I have a feeling that a lot of people who live in New London probably aren't really aware that it exists.
Yeah, so it's a tiny pocket park that if you had gone by a year ago, you never would have thought it was a park because it was a concrete parcel with a sort of falling down fence. It's at the corner of Connecticut and McDonald Street, which is sort of an interesting place where it's a highly residential neighborhood on the Connecticut side, and then sort of down McDonald becomes more sort of industrial. So where the old Day is, where the Freya factory was, Sheffield. And so it's just an interesting cross-section of where some of these big old buildings are and where lots of folks in New London live.
But I'm guessing that folks who live in the neighborhood always knew that parcel was there, but it isn't exactly an area where people use Connecticut as a through street very much.
Right, it's kind of just past that. You get to Garfield and most people end up turning, other than the folks who live in the neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just the wrong side of Garfield for people to be very aware of it. Mm-hmm. I know that, from my own experience, working with Riverside Park, one of the problems with New London open spaces, many of them, is that they're not really they're not hard to access if you know they're there, but you're not going to stumble on them by accident. So they're really not utilized so much beyond the people who live right there.
Yeah, and it's like I didn't even realize that it was there until I had to knock on my door. And I'm like, I'm right around the block. So after they had left, the volunteers, I drove around. I'm like, okay, this is cool. And like I said, I had stood there and it was like, this can be something, you know, and it took off and we've been working on it ever since.
Yeah.
And we'll have a picture in a little while. Okay, who wants to be next?
Okay. Well, 2 summers ago, one of my friends who works at Fresh asked me what I was doing in the summer, and I said, hopefully getting a job. And she said, well, I work for this cool organization called Fresh. I think you'd be interested. So she gave me the website, and I looked it up, and I applied online. And then I got a call to stop by the garden and to see, you know, kind of tour it and talk about the youth programming. And I liked what I heard, so I signed up, and that's my beginning of Fresh.
And it seems like it takes up a lot of your time now.
Yeah, so we just ended our fall programming, our fall youth programming, and we did a lot. We had cooking workshops, we watched documentaries, we do a whole bunch of things. So that was a really good program. The summer program ends in August, every August. So we end with a Freshentation, and in that I was the MC. So I kind of led the event in that. And yeah, I come in the office a couple of times a week to do things with Alicia and my other coworkers.
And now you're a senior in high school, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we'll ask you later about what your plans are after.
Okay.
And Alicia.
Sure, and before I sort of talk about myself, I do want to say it's been sort of amazing since Makeeda just found us online and through a friend to watch like your own development at Fresh and all of the different things that you've contributed through. So she's maybe modest to tell you about all the things, like Makeeda went very quickly from being a participant to a leader to a staff member because of her commitment to Fresh. So just wanted to add that. For me, I actually come to Fresh from a community organizing background. So I actually was like in school for something totally different and doing work within a youth program and decided to go get my social work degree. And through that found community organizing and neighborhood organizing. And at the same time then just met folks in my life who were gardening and taught me how to be a hobby gardenist. And then basically like those two things combined when there was this job opening at Fresh through farm to school work, and to be able to impact the school system and impact school lunches, so school gardens and thinking about local foods in the cafeteria. So I jumped on the opportunity and started working for Fresh that way, and now I'm the director.
And I think when we first met, you were doing things with like New London, which is
That's right.
connected in a way, but a much different scope of organization.
Yeah, so really anything that's about sustainable community development and equity and really trying to think about new ways to organize our communities and the way we live together is really interesting to me. And food is kind of at the center of that because we all eat and it really impacts our communities for good and sometimes not. So.
And it seems that New London is just a really interesting place to do it because we have a small size. It's not hard to make community connections, but there are still a lot of problems that need to be worked on, and a lot of things that need to be made better. Well, we have some slides about some of the things that Fresh does. So we'll go through the slides, one at a time and talk about those different things, and then we'll talk a little more in depth and pick up any pieces we forget. So we are Fresh Food Resources, Education, Security, Health, and I have to say that's one of the better acronyms around.
I can't take any credit for it. It's been around longer than me.
And I kind of remember the beginnings of it when I met Arthur back in like 2004 or 5. And it was just an idea that was starting out.
It is really great because it's still 13 years later really is the glue that holds us together, these 5 things, really thinking about how they fit in our community. So.
Now, there's a lot here. So what does Fresh do?
So we kind of organize our work in buckets, we call them. So we grow food with and for our community through urban farming, community gardens. Most recently, we're talking about Edible New London, this idea that food could be growing all over New London for anybody in New London. And Fresh sees ourselves as a sort of coordinator of that effort and folks who want to participate in that. So it could be fruit trees, just sort of like along the street. Ledge Light Health District is actually interested in taking their hedges out and making them raspberry bushes, and we can maybe help them do that.
Well, they have a great apple tree in their yard anyway, which
Yeah.
I only discovered about a year and a half ago, I think, when I was getting a permit for an event. And it's like, wow, I can grab some apples while I'm here.
And they do want folks to grab the apples. And yeah, part of it is even mapping it. So Makeeda and some other youth were part of a process of like mapping food resources and just thinking about how that relates to growing food and having this edible city. It's pretty
Well, that sounds like a great idea, because as we mentioned, if something's there and no one knows it's there, it really has limited value.
Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, so through growing food, we're really interested in the next little bit of time in more community gardens, more fruit trees, and something that we want to experiment with soon is we're calling them snack boxes. Just raised bed gardens throughout the community that anybody can walk by and harvest. So snap peas and cherry tomatoes and other just really easy to eat things. So if folks are ever interested in hosting a snack bed, they should let us know.
Well, I have to think about some good spots for that. And so that's one piece of it. And then empowering youth sounds like it's not really connected with food, but it really is.
It is, I think it is. So in the youth programs, we do garden every day at the Fresh Mercer and at Fresh at McDonald Park. And our leaders teach the youth how to garden, what plants are what, how to maintain different species. So, of course, it's interconnected.
Now, was getting involved with Fresh your first experience with gardening?
No, not really. I grew up in a health-conscious family. My parents are vegans, so I always knew what healthy food was. I knew how to grow food, but I'd say it's the first experience I had really intensive, being out in the hot sun, growing food, watering, harvesting, all of that.
Because I'm thinking that a lot of the young people in New London, if you don't have gardening experience, it's sometimes really hard to get hold of fresh food.
I agree.
And within walking distance of people's homes, you can always find fast food, but you can't even necessarily find good grocery stores.
It makes us a food desert.
It is, some parts.
Yeah, that's what Fresh is fighting against,
Yeah, it's a long-term fight, but it's really worth it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to talk with young people who come through our program about their experiences thinking about the neighborhood too. So it's part of growing food and then thinking about, where's the closest grocery store to my house? And how easy is it to get there? How easy would it be if I had to walk, if I had to push a stroller and walk? And really just all of the different ways that we get food and use food really goes into that along with growing food.
And what kind of food we're buying at those stores, right? What kind of food can we afford to buy?
And it seems as though sometimes the more healthful food is not the food that's priced right if you're on a limited budget.
Right.
I was a preschool teacher for many years, and I know some of the families, especially immigrant families, it seemed they did a lot of cooking and used a lot of raw ingredients. But with some families, if several generations had already lived with very poor access to fresh food, it's generation after generation, it's hard to keep that tradition alive.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is hard to access a lot of these foods, right? And so one of the things we've actually talked about over the years of Fresh is transitioning from even just having more fruits and vegetables available to our community to thinking about how to inspire and teach people to grow their own food. So we had a larger farm out at Waterford Country School, and that was a really lovely experience and really great to farm and grow all this food. But we found that by focusing in on New London and thinking about how to grow in small spaces, that it's accessible for lots of people to then take that information and go find a small space or through Fresh help find small spaces to grow food.
And as someone who's really interested in land use, New London doesn't have a lot of area, and we can't waste it on like lawns, for example, if I may editorialize a little.
Yeah.
We really have to use what we have well,
Yeah.
and Fresh it has been part of that. And the other thing was connecting communities. So what is Fresh doing for that?
Sure. So a part of the work is really connecting as many people and organizations to this movement for food justice as possible. And so part of that is being a Fresh member, and even just like coming together with us for potlucks and coming to our garden days and to our annual gathering and enjoying each other and learning each other's culture. But also we have some specific buckets of work that we're working on. Upcoming, we are working with the Food Policy Council. So the New London County Food Policy Council covers all of New London County, thinking about food access issues, health disparities, and food production, and how we can really promote sustainable food production for individuals and businesses. And most recently, we hired a food fellow. Her name's Michelle Cruz, and I'm really excited about this. And our food fellow is going to be like the person in New London County who thinks about food justice in kind of all arenas and connecting us all. And the first step is a series of 10 dinners called Setting the Table. And they are for just folks in New London and Groton to come together. There'll be 400 people throughout the year who come to these dinners. And there's just going to be some focus group conversation and workshops around what is it like to experience food in New London and Groton, and how can we come together to make it a better, healthier, more culturally appropriate, and just like funner experience, more fun and joyful experience to be with each other in enjoying food.
Well, in my preschool years, they used to tell us there are two functions to meal times, and one is, getting the physical nutrition we need, and the other is the setting for social interaction.
Yeah, and so with this dinner series, we think we can set the table to do both, right? We can make sure we can feed everybody healthy, culturally appropriate foods, and we can come together and make sure that everybody's working together and building the social fabric that makes New London really special.
Now, here are some pictures. Are these all from the Mercer Urban Farm?
Yes.
So what happens there? I know there are community garden beds that community members can rent, but there's always seems to be a lot more going on than that, just that.
Well, yeah, I guess the middle of the garden is mostly community garden beds, but the outside, those are plants that we grow, the youth grow at Fresh. We have a child play area in the back of Fresh where gardeners can bring their youth, or anybody can just stop by and play around in that. We also have a greenhouse where we grow food, fresh grown food. And I don't know, what else?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much covered it. Yeah, with our youth program, we're growing food that folks can take home. We did a small CSA this year, and then we're donating some of that food to the community meal center. But the idea is to really, use the space wisely and grow as much food as we can in our small footprint.
Now, let's see. This is McDonald Park. So what is at McDonald Park? You mentioned that the community didn't want just vegetable growing, and they didn't want just kids' play area. And I'm thinking it isn't a very big parcel. Is it about quarter acre or so?
No, it's actually 100 by 100.
Yeah, wow.
And we actually got the amount of space. It was documented. It's like, okay, this is the amount of space we have. What can we put in here with having enough space for all these different things that we wanted? And that's where those two design committees came in to place, like, okay, this can't fit, that can't fit, and we took both designs and combined them, and we started out with our planter boxes, which are all filled with topsoil and vegetables and all kinds of different things. We just started working on the children's area. You can see on the slide that they have.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can show the slide.
And there's going to be a concrete wall on the back side, projection screen, a fence on the other side, on the left side of McDonald Park for like painting murals for their muse so they can get their artistic abilities out. So it's just not going to be about planting. There's a lot of different ideas that were put into this, and as the project goes on further, each little piece happens like every Saturday or every time that we go down there. You can see the little differences actually forming what we actually want, or the community wants. So.
Have you thought about this being kind of a pilot program? There are lots of other neighborhoods in New London that have, small, parcels that don't have houses on them that could use some open space for people to gather in.
It is, I've lived in this area probably about 8 years, and I've been over on Mercer, but at McDonald Park, it's probably a first, because it isn't just, like I said, about the planting, it's about everybody's idea mattered. The youth were involved in this, the adults were involved, the community was involved, and everybody's input is making all these things. It was a basic idea and a dream, and it's fallen into place. You can drive by there and that's what they were talking about. And people stop, yeah, okay. You get other cars, they come up, they grab a shovel, they throw dirt in there, they're sweeping things up, they're coming by when we have the cookout days. And it's drawn a lot of people in that they didn't even realize that this place existed. That's the whole purpose of it.
Now, as someone who lives in the neighborhood, has it been a mechanism for people to get to know who their neighbors are?
Yeah, I didn't even realize where I live, my property borders 16 houses between Blackhall and Connecticut Avenue. At that park, I met 6 of my backyard neighbors. It was amazing, and everybody got hands-on, dirty, and at the end of the day, we all shook hands oh, I'll talk to you later. It was beautiful.
I do think more and more people just stay inside their houses and don't spend as much time with their neighbors unless there is an intentional spot that is a gathering place.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting about this park, when we first started talking to folks who lived in the neighborhood, the park sort of had a bad reputation, and it didn't have even a bench in it. It had a garbage can at that point. And
it was
folks,
probably not consistently used even.
Right, yeah, or emptied.
Yeah.
Right.
And so there was a lot of conversation. Oh, we would love to spend more time outside, but we don't feel like we have a place to go. And so the idea that folks could reclaim that space for positive use and get outside, get to know their neighbors, and have a space to go. Because there are a lot of families in that neighborhood that, would say, well, yeah, we'd spend more time outside, but where would we go?
And as such a tiny little parcel, it seems as though every neighborhood probably has a small, lot that, might be 1/8 of an acre.
Yeah.
And where you could have a gathering place. It's amazing how much can be put in there without it seeming too crowded or overwhelming.
No. Yeah, it was, like I said, we had the footage, and we kind of on Connecticut Avenue, you could stand dead center and we looked across the open park. It's okay, fire pit would look great over there, planter boxes over there, the kids are there, and we're all just looking at this empty piece of property, and we're throwing all these ideas back and forth, and I was wow, this is really cool.
Wow.
You know?
And then it unfolded.
Yeah, and it still is. It's still going.
I have to say, I drive around New London and I see those spaces now. I'm oh, I wonder if that neighborhood would like us to do a park. And we've talked about that through our membership, thinking about, are there people who want to get in touch with Fresh and talk about, there could be a project in my neighborhood. So.
And one other question I had that was kind of related is, how does an organization like Fresh partner with the city to do to do things on city property that the city itself doesn't have resources for, but certainly benefits from as a whole?
Yeah, so I think we have a very strong relationship with our city for that purpose. So both the Mercer property and McDonald Park are city parcels, and we know that our city has limited resources and isn't able to kind of keep up with the amount of open space we would love to enjoy. And so this project was actually initiated through the mayor's office. They contacted Fresh to see if we wanted to do something with that park. And we weren't sure, because we wanted to make sure the neighborhood wanted us to do something with the park. But through that, it's been really great. We have a partnership grant through the DEP, and the city actually gets the funding, but lets Fresh dictate how it's spent and really work with the neighborhood to talk about how we can spend it. We've talked to the folks from the water department who have come and helped, and they put the word out for us, and we then maintain the park for them, so it's pretty mutually beneficial.
We need more of them. Okay, okay now, growing and learning with the young people. So you've been in the summer program and the fall program. What do those programs include?
Good question. So on day one, we have a little get together. We usually go to Waterford Country School where our old farm is, and we do a day of getting to know each other. We play games. We look at the farm animals, the farm, and then from there on out, we kind of just plan our days with workshops. We talk about body positivity, mindfulness. We do cooking workshops, watch documentaries about the food system, about social justice, about all of that. So a lot of it is getting to know our partners and getting to know the world.
So what part of it do you like most?
That's a good question. I like the conferences we go to. My first conference with Fresh was NESOG. It was last year. And I have to say, it was probably my favorite to this point. I met so many youth from New England. I still talk to a lot of them to this day. And it was just wonderful to see how popular food justice is, but how little, like, a lot of us know about it. So it was probably my favorite thing to do.
That's kind of exciting. I mean, there are groups all around New England that are doing similar kinds of work involving youth in food justice issues.
Yeah, in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, youth groups come to our garden, and we have like chill days. We talk about our organizations. We work together to, just execute. It's a really good time.
Well, as someone who's getting older, I'm really glad to see that, your generation doing that. I grew up in the city in Philadelphia, and I don't think I ever grew anything until I was like 20.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I didn't really live in a dense urban area. We had grass and, shrubs, but other than like some neighbors with an odd tomato plant, we really did no food gardening at all. So I'm glad to see that we're coming back to that.
What's nice within, it's kind of our connecting communities bucket, which we have tons of fun doing, but the farm to school work that I started with Fresh was really kind of about that idea of even planting the seed well before high school. So by then you were saying, it's kind of interesting that we're all doing all this learning together, and so many people have so much to learn, and we kind of hope that we get to a point where by the time that you reach high school, you're just like so primed and ready to go that you're just kind of hitting the ground running through Fresh to make all of these community improvements, which a lot of young people really have impacted our community through that work. And over the next year, we're excited. The school district, another way we partner with the city is directly through the schools. And so the school district just got a farm to school grant through the USDA to do an urban farm to school curriculum for New London Public Schools. So there's a lot of farm to school curriculums out there for Vermont and some rural places, and they're great for those communities. And we've learned a lot from those communities, but we really need to think about how we're going to adapt to what it means to teach that kind of stuff within a large school district, in an urban school district, and in a multicultural school district. So over the next 2 years, we'll be doing that, and then hopefully rolling it out in the 2019 school year.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's kind of a new thing for people to be thinking about in New London, and it is largely thanks to the work of Fresh. From the looking at the plan of conservation and development that the city just adopted a couple of months ago. One piece was, and you'll remember this very well, that there was a section on maybe community gardens a little bit, but it was really sparse and really not much thought had gone into it. And that was one of the sections that was most changed and solidified and expanded to include urban farming and a lot of different pieces of growing food within our community. So it's even in the plan.
Yeah, no, and that was really great. And to have other advocates like Rana there in planning and zoning who are doing things because, Mercer has a community garden, our Mercer community garden, but Riverside Park has a community garden, and Hawkins, and there's this movement around the city so that, Fresh loves to be a catalyst for that, but there are so many people who are interested in that it doesn't certainly end with Fresh work. And I think there are a lot of people who are very excited about the concept of how do we develop our city in a way that is really healthy for us all and really promotes that kind of health.
Now, there are community gardens at many of the schools as well, and Fresh had a hand in starting a lot of those. All of those, maybe, or most of them?
Most of them. So yeah, the Winthrop School Garden, we've done some help. We've helped them kind of move into expansion and think about how to use the garden. But there were some really interested teachers there who were really progressive and on top of it. I think before Fresh even had that vision, so which was pretty amazing. But all the schools have access to a school garden at this point, and Fresh has helped with that. And the students use those during classrooms. The cafeteria hopefully is going to start using some of the herbs, and just kind of having this outdoor experiential learning classroom has been really great to think about. You know, you can surround yourself with food and it normalizes just like carrots and tomatoes and kind of all that fresh food that's around you just by going out to the garden and writing a story, right? Like we used to think, oh, you could go out and learn about plant parts. But it's so much more than that. It's just really like acknowledging, oh, food grows here in the city and I eat food, and it's not that foreign to actually take a carrot out of the ground and that there are green tops on it. It could be purple.
It could be. I was told, well, I learned recently that if you make carrot soup, but you use purple carrots, it looks like blood. So someday, I have not done that. But you know, when I was teaching preschool and toddlers, even 1-year-olds, the last place I worked had a garden on site, and I think the 1-year-olds were the most enthusiastic gardeners in the whole center. And we had carrots, we had little round carrots, and we had it was fantastic. Digging potatoes was like magic. It was great. And so even it would be great to be able to expand that even before kindergarten, because it's really easy to start normalizing that if you're having children pick their own veggies when they're 2 years old, and then you cook them and that's your snack.
Yeah. I also find it to be such a great equalizer. You were saying that about potatoes, and I've seen 3-year-olds find potatoes, I've seen high school students find potatoes, and like older grown-ups find potatoes, and everybody is equally impressed with that. Like, oh, it's magic. They're here.
And at Fresh we grow purple potatoes, so those are always more exciting.
You know, there are lots of kinds of potatoes, and I do think that the gardening trend has one great thing is that people have gotten accustomed to different varieties of common foods. You know, not all potatoes are like the kind that grow in either Maine or Idaho in huge farms. There are like hundreds of kinds and colors, and are they white inside or yellow inside or purple inside? Or there's a lot more interesting stuff going on than you can just find in the grocery store.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, I guess we can talk a little bit about how to support Fresh and get involved, and then maybe we'll talk some more about some big issues. So one way to get involved with Fresh is?
One way is to become a member. And members give their time and talent and treasure. And right now, it being the end of the year and the holiday season, we are asking for folks who want to become members to donate some treasure with Fresh. And you can become a member from $5 all the way up to $250. We do want folks around the community to be a part of Fresh in any way that they can. And we use the money to support youth stipends and youth wages, to grow new gardens, to pay for our seeds and our soil. And most members pay about $50 to $100 a year. And through that, you become connected to Fresh in all sorts of ways. So you get information about Fresh, you get invited to our annual gathering and get to meet all of the people who are impacted. And we hope that, when you share your treasure, you also want to come and share your talents with us and your time. And so folks who are members often come and volunteer on Saturday work days. We have carpenters like Tony who have helped us really figure out how to execute all these grand visions that we have. Folks who help fill the beds. And so I think it's a really great way to just really be a part of the movement with us together. So.
And that is really part of the point of having shows like this at this time of year, because a lot of people are thinking both in terms of, what donations to make to the end of the year if you itemize your deductions on your taxes, but also thinking about gift giving in this season, and there are a lot of gifts that aren't just, bringing more stuff into the house.
That's right. You do get a handy membership card. You get, I believe it's 5% off of all fresh plants and merchandise for the person that you'd be giving it the membership to. And yeah, so it does make a very nice gift.
Now, for people who want to get involved through volunteering, now we mentioned Tony and his carpentry, but what other kinds of things can volunteers for Fresh do?
The biggest need we always have is folks who want to come out and help us grow food. And so you need no knowledge, or you can have lots of expertise in the subject, but we come together and you can help us weed, you can help plant in the greenhouse, you can help just like those raised beds that Makeeda was talking about, working with young people on Saturdays and evenings and really growing as much food as we possibly can for us all to take home together. We also invite folks in who are really interested in working with young people and sharing their just particular knowledge. So whether you want to be a mentor or you have a really like strong interest in something that is food related or cooking, you can come work with the youth program. Or if you want to host a snack bed in your yard or somewhere else, we are really interested in thinking about where else we can grow food, and looking for neighborhood leaders who are really interested in kind of corralling folks in their neighborhood to do that.
I have to tell you this, I find the snack bed idea really intriguing. So if a person wants to host, or an organization wants to host a snack bed, how do you go about it? Do people make their own bed? Can Fresh help build the bed?
Yeah, so we have not actually executed this yet. So
Okay.
we will be experimenting with that this year. But how I envision it happening is that Fresh would order the materials and build the beds and fill it with soil and even commit to planting and harvesting when need be. We would ask folks to be committed to watering and to do some co-fundraising with us. And so we do need the money to build the materials or the building materials and get the soil. And so just looking for folks who would be willing to help sponsor that for us. And really watering is probably the biggest commitment.
Well, it sounds like on a smaller scale, not that much different from what Fresh has done in getting the Riverside Community Garden started and the Calkins Community Garden started. I had experience with both of those at their onset, and Riverside in particular, that without the initial investment by Fresh for getting the beds, the soil, the fence, and the water hookup. And then community people were ready to garden and, exchange seeds, and we got other grants to, purchase a shed and have shared tools on site, stuff like that, and, fruit trees and some other common things. But it was really helpful to have Fresh make that initial expense to, create the physical environment where that coming together could be. So, and one other question, I guess it's mostly related to the Mercer farm. Do you have beds to rent every year, or do you have a wait list, or what does a person do who wants to rent a bed?
So if you'd like to rent a bed, you can look on our website on how to get in touch with us. And you would get in touch with Frida, who manages all of that. We have open beds every year, and then at a certain point, it always turns into a wait list. And so folks rotate in and out. Some folks have been gardening, especially at Mercer, for
probably
almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And some folks, garden for a couple years and either move to a closer community garden, grow food at their own house, and then beds open up. And so I would say we probably have about, of the 60, 10 to 15 open up each year, and they do fill up quickly though. Yeah. By March, we really hope to have folks assigned to their beds.
So people should really get in touch as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
If they're interested in renting a bed there.
Yes. And I didn't mention it before, but on our website, we also have all of our membership info. So if folks are interested in that, you can find that on our website as well.
And I know you do online donations, take
Yep.
online donations as well. And I guess before we talk a little bit about an upcoming event, I was kind of interested in hearing from each of you your single best personal experience with Fresh.
I don't know if I could pick my absolute best, but I do love the story of door knocking for McDonald Park and meeting Denise, who, like Tony, is one of our design leaders. We have 5 community members on that team. And Denise has this amazing vision for the park. She has for a really long time, and was just sort of waiting for someone to ask. And it was a cold-ish October day, and we were walking around the neighborhoods door knocking. Makeeda was a part of the team that day. And I said to folks on the team, okay, we're gonna all split up. Don't go in people's houses though, right? Knock, say hello, especially for our young people, let's make sure we're just staying as a team. And I was with Eric, and it was cold, and Denise's husband invited us in, and I was like, yeah, okay, we're going in. And I broke my own rule. And Denise was in the background, and she was yelling at her husband, why are you letting strangers in our house? You don't know who they are. They could be crazy people. And she came out and was like, who are you? And then we sat down and we had a cup of tea and we had this amazing conversation about the park. And now she is just not only a strong leader within McDonald Park, but she has really just gotten the bug for civic engagement in general. She's part of a parent leadership team. She's thinking about all the different ways that she can contribute to New London. Yeah. So.
I think mine, this summer, a youth organization from Massachusetts called Youth Grow came to our garden, our Mercer garden, and we grilled chicken, corn. It was kind of like a potluck. They brought food and we brought food. It was a great time. We had fishbowl discussions and just talked about food justice and just growing food. It was a really good experience. It's probably one of my favorites.
Oh, I actually have one. It's like I was talking about, we had the planter boxes on our 2 designs, and we came up with the one. It's okay, all these are going to go here, the fresh beds are going to go here. And then we ended up with more space, and I just went down there on a Saturday morning. There was leftover lumber from all the planter boxes that we had, and I started popping all these boxes all together and ended up making a kids box, so the kids can actually have their own planter box and actually sit inside of it. Cut all the angles, and I stood back, and I was almost in tears.
Wow.
Had music going. It was like a 2.5-hour thing, and I just stood back yeah, this is why I started doing this, and it worked out really well. And I took pictures. I'm like, okay, this is what we envisioned, and it was sitting right in front of me the whole time.
So it really does make a big difference.
It is it's just good old-fashioned labor. You get your hands dirty and just stand back and get to see what all hands on deck actually does.
And I'll be really interested in seeing what happens with that neighborhood in the next 5 or 10 years, because I know that there have been challenges in the neighborhood in terms of neighborhood security, and but I like seeing the steps forward and the neighbors getting to know each other.
There has been a difference from when we started until now. Even on the work days, see more people coming out, not afraid to walk by the park, stopping in, saying hello, getting involved literally from the community. It's oh, I didn't know you guys were doing this. And it's okay, you see them one Saturday, then you see them another Saturday, and it's oh, how's the park going? You see them at a supermarket or something. Oh, how's it going down there? And it's okay. So it's been it has been a difference from when we first started, just walking the ground, seeing where everything's going to go until now. It has made a big difference. So.
And it's been amazing to be with this group of leaders. We talk about the park, and we talk about food, and we talk about gardening, and then we talk about the neighborhood, and then we talk about potential development, and we talk about police and community relations, and then we talk about, drug use and how we can be better community members to each other and how we can support each other if we're having issues. And the intersection of all these issues is really just been interesting to think about how the neighborhood will grow and how it will be shaped in the future. And there is conversation amongst the group of leaders to say, like, thanks, Fresh, for doing your thing. You can step out of a lot of that now, because we're going to talk about maybe a neighborhood watch group or our own kind of neighborhood association in kind of a different, more progressive grassroots way, which I just think has been really interesting and rewarding to see how those folks will kind of help dictate what that neighborhood looks like.
And
in 5
really,
years.
has only been going on for a couple of years. It's not that long ago that no one was thinking about doing this at McDonald Park.
Yeah, it was actually like just over a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was October of 2016.
Wow. So we have, I think, about 5 minutes left. And so I wanted to kind of go off track a little bit to talk about community land trusts, because there are a lot of groups that are partnering in this idea of community land trust, and Fresh is one of them. And there will be an event. I don't know if we can get a slide or not, but maybe it's too late. We'll see. We'll try to. There is an event this Sunday, a showing of a film called Homes and Hands, that's going to be at Mount Moriah on Moore Street. It's at 1:30 in the afternoon. And it should be really interesting. It's a 40-minute film, and it talks about a few communities that started community land trusts. And I guess one of the issues, and maybe I'll ask you about this, Fresh has talked about food growth, but the whole issue of how do we use our land in New London? We think, we need housing. What else do people need in the city in terms of, what to put on our land? And community gardens is one answer. Okay, so thank you. So Sunday, December 10th, Mount Moriah at 22 Moore Avenue. There is a parking lot there. I have to say it was not adequate to the participation last time, but it's not hard to park on Moore Avenue or on nearby Shaw Street. And the film talks about community land trusts primarily to create affordable home ownership, but not exclusively for that purpose, in 3 communities: in Durham, North Carolina, in Burlington, Vermont, and in Albuquerque. And it's really interesting, and there are some things that happened in other places that are recounted in the film that just could have happened in New London. Some of the history in Durham just sounds exactly what happened to neighborhoods like the Mercer neighborhood or the McDonald Park neighborhood in the 50s, where they were very functional, vibrant neighborhoods, and then the older generation passed away, and the next generation fled to the suburbs, and there was thank you, and there was a real degradation of the neighborhood, where people didn't know each other anymore. So it's free, there will be food, so we really recommend that people join us for that activity.
Childcare too.
And childcare.
Yep.
Thank you, that's true. So it's very family friendly. There's lunch for people who really want lunch, and there are just snacks like cookies and tea and coffee for people who just want that.
Yeah. And if I can have 1 minute to just sort of
you have
say
a few,
that, we think about the needs of folks right now. You need land to grow food, and community gardens are one way to do that, but having your own land at home actually makes it a lot easier. We love to garden with folks, but I also love to grow in my backyard and be able to just walk outside and water and harvest whenever I need it. But also, we can't really talk about food justice until we talk about who controls land use, and historically, who has owned land and who has been left out of that process. And we would be doing a big disservice if we didn't consider that when we really think about how we develop and how we think about food. Because land and food were just like the basis for this country, and the basis for a lot of the injustices that we've built our societies on. And so we're really interested in a land trust as a way to just like combat that and think differently about how we share our resources and how we live together.
And especially in terms of food production, so many people of color actually historically have grown food in this country for hundreds of years, but because they couldn't own the land, they really didn't benefit from the farming experience. So
Right.
we do want to get that back on track.
Absolutely.
You might have one more minute to remind people how to find out more about Fresh.
www.freshnewlondon.org.
Yeah, you can find out about volunteering, you can find out about donating, becoming members, upcoming events.
Absolutely.
We also have a Facebook page,
Oh,
Fresh New London on Facebook, and on Instagram, Fresh New London.
okay.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is why we work with young people.
Yes, I know, because I would totally forget Instagram and Facebook, left to my own. Well, thank you, Makeeda and Alicia and Tony. And we'll see you at some Fresh events coming up.
Yeah.
And I hope people out there get in touch with you to find out more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.